After weeks of worrying about our centre-forward situation, we finally found the secret to beating Real Madrid. Just start Alessia Russo up front. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast, and it's me, Phil Costa, in the hosting chair again. I knew Elliot's Vegas pictures would come in handy eventually after Monday's episode, in which we covered some Mars Lewis Skelly, Ricardo Calafiori, Mikel Merino, Bukayo Saka, and just a general Arsenal look at the international break. I guess the real challenge today will be maintaining some level of entertainment despite recording only 3 days later and not much happening between then. Well, at least from a men's perspective anyway, although I'm sure my guests will find ways to keep the conversation flowing. Speaking of guests, joining me today is Clive Palmer. Hello, Clive.
Hello. Don't worry about talking, mate. I can talk to a piece of wood.
I don't doubt that. And we've also got Poz, who some of you may know as Paul. Hello, Paul.
Woohoo! And that's no way to refer to me, Clive. Piece of wood.
We've started, guys. So I think there's only
We're in
one
the
place
section,
to start.
Phil.
Yeah, exactly. There's only one place to start, and that's with what happened at Emirates Stadium last night, where the Arsenal women overturned a 2-0 first leg deficit against Real Madrid to win 3-0 and book their place in the Champions League semi-finals. I did watch the game, and I thought it was a brilliant performance, actually. I was a bit nervous because after they dominated the first half, the goal didn't arrive, but I think they just needed one to go in before the floodgates opened, and open they did. Obviously, 3 goals came in 13 second half minutes. Honestly, it could have been more. They finished the game with 18 shots, 7 on target. And I think across both legs, it probably feels like a fair result. Clive, you were there alongside 22,500 other people there to watch. Obviously, it was an English record as well. Tell me a bit about your night in M5.
Yeah, I've been to a few women's games. I'm not going to pretend I'm close to Tim on this. You know what I mean? Because he's been everywhere, home and away for a long time. But yeah, I've been to a few of the Emirates games for sure, and this was a good one. I just had a feeling in the daytime it might be okay, and I sort of said I just bought some late tickets and went along. It's quite nice going to the Emirates when it's sort of half full. You know, it's really cool. It's a lovely environment with the women's game. Really is inclusive, and I really enjoy it. Went with my daughter, and absolutely fantastic. But I don't know the other teams so well. You know, I know Arsenal's team so well. So there, Linda Caicedo, you can't miss her because she's very quick on the left wing. And so you get to know a few of the players. Left back, I think, played for Spain, scored the winning goal in the World Cup final. But that's about it. Yeah, that's about it for me. I'm all about the Arsenal team. So poor Tim gets a message from me pre-game, gets a voice note the day after. I think he's trying to stay away from me. Actually, I just keep hounding him. We select teams and all the rest of it. So. But yeah, first half, I'm just telling my daughter, I'm saying to her, well, you know what, we're putting too many crosses in. This ain't going to work. We need to fix this. We need to start playing the ball shorter. Before I even got back to my seat, it was 2-1 from a cross. and then we had another cross for the second goal. So I'm thinking, you may know about this game. and then we had a cross set piece for the third goal. And it was, fantastic performances. So many performances. It was so intense in the second half. It's my favourite women's game, and I was there for Wolfsburg, Bayern Munich. I've been to see City, United, Chelsea, all the big games really, Villa, Liverpool, at the Emirates. But this is my favourite because second half, they just decided to throw off all the shackles and go for it. And when they do that, they're a very good team, and me and Tim were talking today. They played like they really wanted to win. And sometimes I feel, I'm not even sure the girls know how good they are, or how good they could be. But they really did reach the highest level I've seen in a long time. So yeah, great night.
Yeah, I mean, you're right to highlight Linda Caicedo. I think she's a big threat in transition. But beyond that, Real Madrid didn't really have a lot. And I think when they needed to be strong, I think Daphne Van Domselaar was good with a couple of saves. The defense were really good as well. But, the difference makers for me on the night, Chloe Kelly, obviously down that right-hand side, she was the threat. You spoke about the crosses. She was the threat from crossing situations. Russo, just a brilliant target. Sort of target up front, a focal point. I thought Mariona was brilliant in midfield again. I've really grown to love her. Actually, I didn't know too much about her before she came, but It's easy to get lost in that Barcelona team, but there's so much talent in her 2 feet. I love how she just drops deep and likes to conduct things as well. It's obviously Lyon now in the semi-final, who are very tough opposition. There's a reunion, obviously, with Joe Montemurro as well. Do you fancy our chances there, Clive?
Well, I've not checked yet with Tim to see if we should fancy my chance, but I think I think we may be slight underdogs because they're getting back to a good level. A couple of years ago, I think we beat them 5-1. I think in the Champions League game. So I remember that, but I think I did catch their game the other day against Bayern Munich, and I thought we'll look quite good. So I'm not going to say anything whether we'll beat them, but obviously Joe's coming back. That's one of Tim's mates. So that'll be interesting for him, at least from a reporting point of view. So yeah, I think it's maybe 60-40, 50-50 game. So let's see, right? A lot of this is in the head, right? So let's see what we do.
Well, look, if the men are looking for inspiration, they don't have to look very far. Let's see if they can repeat the feat. Paul, did you catch any of the game? Do you want to have any last words on this before we move on to Fulham?
I didn't, and I can't pretend too much on it. I saw Alessia Russo's highlights. What a force, what a tornado. She could do a job on either the men's or the women's team. Like, the one thing we're dropping off a bit on, maybe a couple of things on the men's side, is that pressing energy across the front. Man, she could take over from Havertz with the hustle she puts in there. Very impressive, but no, I have no G2 intel or alpha to add on the women's game, I'm afraid.
No worries. Everyone just hashtag Paul out and we can move on with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from the men's side of things, we are just 5 days away from Arsenal playing football again. And some of you listening might think it's still too early to preview the Fulham game. I totally get that. But also, I don't really care, as it's the first topic in my agenda and we need to make up the time somehow. So let's talk Fulham, who by all accounts have been decent under Marco Silva this season after it took them a little while to get going. They lost a couple of key players over the summer, but they're currently 8th in the Premier League now and very much in that cluster between 10th and 4th, where only 5 points separate 7 teams. So it's kind of going to be a blockbuster finish in terms of those European places, whether it's Champions League or Europa League. I know all eyes are on Real Madrid from an Arsenal perspective, but we can't take them for granted, with European football still attainable in their eyes. And actually, Fulham have given us some trouble in the recent past. Our last 3 meetings have been draw, defeat, draw, which isn't great. 2 points from a possible 9. Paul, I'll start with you. Why do you think Fulham have given us some trouble recently, and how should Arsenal approach this game?
Yeah, I mean, they're an interesting challenge because usually if we're struggling with somebody, it's because either they're fantastic or they're very good at parking the bus, and that's not really who Fulham are. I mean, they're pretty good at hitting on the break, but they're not looking to sit in. They play very good football. Maybe somehow we lack a little intimidation factor with them. I think they fancy that they can play football, and they can. Maybe the fact that half their team was at Arsenal a year or two ago and we pissed a few of them off along the way, means they come in with just, that they've been there. They know enough about us, maybe too much about us. The ones who haven't played for us in recent times are sitting beside guys in the dressing room who know plenty about us, and even if it's the perception that they kind of have a bit of an inside track on us and how we do things and how Mikel approaches, like, I think maybe it just takes away a little fear factor. But they play good football, and if we don't maintain full possession across a game, I think that'll be a bit of a challenge for us at the moment because we're still coming back to full strength and ability, technical security without so much flows from Saka. We think of Saka as this attacking player who scores goals and has great, but so much of our stability in attack and defense, our ability to control the flow of a game, is based on the fact that Saka and Odegaard and our right back of the day can set a platform for attack to get into position, maybe even slow it down a little bit if that's not quite how we think about it. But that's kind of we kind of roll the cannons into position when Saka and Odegaard and Timber or White are doing their triangles and everybody else gets into position. We get our rest defense. So that's kind of critical for how we maintain control. It doesn't answer why we may have had challenges with them in the past, but it could be why we have challenges in this game and in recent games against other teams. We don't have the same level of control. Saka is very often about building that platform between how we transition or how we don't get transitioned. So, and I think Fulham are a very, very good transition team. Alex Iwobi bombing down the pitch, Amanda Traore tearing down the other side. Yeah, we could have an interesting time. And
yeah,
I think we'll do well, but they'll be challenged. They're not intimidated by us. So
yeah, you're kind of right to nail a few different of the angles to this game, because obviously there's our recent record, there's the Halem boys, there's a few players returning from an Arsenal perspective, and Clive, I think Paul's absolutely right. Fulham are a side who like to utilise the wide areas with Castagna, Robinson pushing forward from fullback, but then they've got the guys just behind the striker, whether it's Traore, Smith Rowe, Iwobi, who are always going to be looking to support in transition. I mean, that's actually how they scored against us in, was it early December, when Raul Jimenez ran off the back of Kivior? I mean, they barely touched the ball for the first 10 minutes of that game, and they ended up scoring with their first shot. So obviously we're at home. The impetus will be with us. How important is it, or will it be, to find that balance between pushing our players forward but also being wary of those transitional threats?
Yeah, I think Paul said something there. They're not intimidated by us, and that's really the line. Really, that's really the statement. They've got good football players, and good football players don't hide. When they get the ball, get opportunities, they want to take it. They want to move with it, right? So when they want to play a transition game, they got Traore. They got a couple of centre forwards in Manus and Jimenez, is it? I think Jimenez is the other centre forward. So they've got a focal point to hit. And they've got a number of 10s and wide players that can play behind them and supplement them with good ability. Smith Rowe, Iwobi, Nelson was there for a bit. And they've got Anthony Robertson flying up and down the left wing, and his numbers look pretty good, right? So all the players, you sort of know them. They sort of buy, apart from Manise maybe and Sasha Lukic, they buy from within the league, so they're known. Obviously, Bassi come from Ajax, but I watched him at Rangers. I watched Rangers, so he's known as a lefty centre back. So they have their lefties on left hand side. In defence they play out like we do. So yeah, they're not a bad side. And also, I think the coach is good. I think he's a really, really good coach. He had a rough time at Everton, but he's a good coach. I often find the teams that give us the most problems, funny enough, like I think Eddie Howe on a one-off is a good coach. When he fancies Arsenal, he knows what to do. Emery, again, when he fancies a job against Arsenal, so he knows what to do. Iraola, because they're mates, he fancies a job. He's looking at it. He's using Arsenal as a benchmark. And I think their coach is the same. I think they look at Arteta as a peer, a young man, similar ages per se. He's a career in the game, and they want to take him. They want to take him, and they want to pull him apart, and they really do focus on him. I think the game this season was the one of the most travesty. Also, a Christmas or so ago, they beat us fair and square away. In the home game, then we went down. They went down to 10 men, and we were sloppy. We weren't at the races, and I think it was very, very costly, those 2 points. But funny enough, to draw this season, I thought we battered them. And if anything, I think it showed the gap. So we need to hold on to that game as a benchmark, even though we conceded the typical one-shot goal, which is a classic Arsenal in the early phase of the season. But after 2 weeks, 2 and a bit weeks off, I think we'll come back with renewed energy, knowing, just don't give me the Europa League music ever again. Just focus on doing the job so we can stay in the Champions League places. And so we go into the Madrid games with a level of serenity. That's what I'm really after, really. If we do win, and Liverpool, I'm going to say so now, don't laugh at me. If we do win, I'm going to say it anyway.
We're all thinking it.
And Liverpool play the next day against Everton at Anfield. Yeah, and say they lose, right? Oh, look forward to next Thursday, pod. Yeah, it should be fun.
Obviously, you highlighted.
I was just going to say, Phil.
Yeah, go.
Like, we know we're not going to pull them back, but it would be really good psychology just to make it interesting for us, right? Just to just to be back into that conversation of could they, would they. It's just good for the psychology of this team while we're going down the Champions League route. If we can get back into the conversation, if we can get it into that zone of they couldn't, could they? We probably couldn't, but
they've had a bad few weeks. I mean, they've been knocked out of the Champions League. They lost the League Cup final. There's the whole thing about Trent now. Their fans are fuming about it, and obviously, I can understand it because if it was Saka going to Real Madrid on a fee, I'd be fuming as well. So, they are vulnerable, and I just wish we were maybe that little bit closer to really apply some pressure. But like Clive said, you never know. One result could really get them doubting themselves. I think they've had a couple of injuries over the break as well. So let's see what happens. But obviously, we touched on it briefly during Monday's pod, but there have been some whispers about a certain somebody being available for the Fulham game after coming through some more training sessions with the first team. And all I can say is activate those bloody sirens, because this is not a drill. Bukayo Saka is back on the grass and he's being photographed by the Arsenal social media team. So we're not looking for boots anymore. We're not looking for shin pads in the background, because he posted a picture on Instagram earlier with a big old smile, a thumbs up to the camera, and the caption that said "Hello again."
It's amazing what you can do with those AI images these days, isn't it?
They haven't been Studio Ghibli'd yet. I just feel like blue skies have overpowered the grey. You know, the sun is shining, the birds are singing to welcome the first few days of spring. Paul, on a scale of 1 to we're winning it all, where are you?
1 off, we're winning it all. We're just winning one of the 2 big tournaments this year. I'm not a greedy man. There's plenty to go around, but yes, we're just winning the Champions League this year, Phil. Look, his mere aura around the team, I don't want him to play against Fulham. He can skip the next 2 games. For me, he's a guy, as long as he's as long as he's healthy, he's going to pick up pretty close to where he left off. He's just one of those players. He's so comfortable playing within his levels. Other players, it's like, he's going to need 2 or 3 or 4 levels to get games to get back to his level. I think Saka will get there really quickly. Of course, he'll need some match fitness. So he'll want to get some minutes in the next couple of games. But I'm not as concerned about him, given his youth, the efficiency and economy of kind of how he moves his game, etc. He won't need nearly as much as many other players to get to his level. So I'm stoked. I think it's meaningful. With another player, I'd be like, well, okay, we got him back. A Thomas Partey comes back. It's like, okay, but he's going to need 3-4 games to get, or 10 or 15 to get to the levels that we would require from him, even going back a couple of seasons. And there's a few players in that mode who need a few games before you really see their upside. I think Saka will get there almost immediately, but obviously the more the merrier. I'm stoked.
I mean, when it comes to Saka, I don't think we can underestimate his impact on the team, and obviously his impact his absence has had on our season, because he's our guy. He's the guy. And I compared him to Mohamed Salah on Monday's pod, because nobody else in this team holds the attacking weight that he does in terms of end product. I mean, Kai Havertz is extremely useful for us tactically. Martin Odegaard can really run things when he's on form, but neither of them have that inevitability factor who, when it comes to Saka, I trust in front of goal, who I trust most to make the right pass, who I trust most to roll inside 2 defenders when he's being double teamed, or even to put us ahead when the game's 0-0. Paul, I'm going to stick with you because I asked Clive this question on Monday, so I'll swing it back to you. What does his return give this team tactically and mentally?
Well, mentally, loads. Also, it's just one more player let's start with the basics. It's one more player in the attack when we basically go from, we've got all our attacking players on the field and we have no other option to bring on. So he gives us, let's assume he starts against Real Madrid, he gives us a real option off the bench, whoever that might be. If it's Martinelli who comes on at 70 minutes, that's something they haven't faced for 70 minutes. And now you got Martinelli. So at a base level, he gives us an attacking option we need off the bench by being on the pitch. Secondly, he is our game in a way no other player is. Not just because of his individual contributions in attack. He is how we stabilize the game so that we're not getting... Otherwise, like, what's Real Madrid like? They like an open game going back and forward where they, for 1/3 of the game, they just turn it on and in moments they kill you. And if you go out there as 11 players trying to play good football, which is what we are without Saka, they're going to kill us. In no uncertain terms, the only way we would hang in there is if we sat back, kept our shape. With Saka, we can have different phases, different moments in the game where we can be in the attack, where we can be in the attacking third and be in our shape, transition back and forward between, okay, now we need to drop. We can press. So he's another pressing agent that gives us, and like without the press, we're very vulnerable. Because we chase them around a bit. They play it through us. I mean, not too many teams are going to play through us the way Real Madrid can at different times. So that whole ability to transition between the different phases within possession as you move up the pitch and then move back down the pitch, he's critical to giving us an anchor point for kind of all the different stages of the game. And he's one... We may talk about Zubamendi and what does he bring and not bring, but there certain players have a kind of an invisible anchoring effect on the team. Now you can argue whether they have it or not. I always used to look at Busquets, for example, and say, what is it like? He's brilliant and clever because everybody tells me he is, and I see certain moments in the game where he's brilliant and clever. But it's also this kind of invisible kind of tempo, speed it up, speed it down, intelligence being the... And Saka, in some ways, is that player for us because it's not Thomas Partey, it's not Declan Rice. I mean, they all bring something, they all bring position, but like, where's the tempo of our game, the kind of invisible central force that determines how we play and transition? At the moment, it's Saka with Martin Odegaard and the right back. That's my view of him.
Yeah, I was digging through some stats last night and they don't make for pretty reading despite not playing a single minute since December 21st. Obviously, when he went off injured against Crystal Palace, he still leads this Arsenal team for assists. He's got 10 and Rice is the nearest to him on 5. He leads the team for shots per game, key passes per game, completed dribbles per game. Clive, is it unrealistic, especially after a surgery and a long spell out, to expect Saka to do what Saka normally does and put him on our back? Or in a season that hasn't given us much to dream about, why can't we dream with him, you know?
Yeah, it's going to be tough for him. I think they're going to build him up, aren't they? They're going to build up his minutes. No matter how many sprints you do on the lovely green grass at London Colney, when a player's chasing after you, you extend yourself a little bit more, and then you need to see how you react to those situations. Your twisting and turning is more explosive because it's in an ultra competitive environment. So I'm just hopefully looks the same and feels the same. I was quite surprised to see Ben White actually. So he's given me caution because Ben White came back and he's such a smooth runner, but then to see him look a bit jerky in certain situations because he's just getting fit again. Oh, I've never seen that, you know, and so it's a reminder to say that they're only humans. If you don't do your job for 3 to 4 months, the first day you come back, it's just, you're not going to be the same as when you left, right? So I have to accept that, even though I'm not accepting it mentally. I expect him to score a hat trick at the Bernabeu, but in the reality, it's not gonna happen. I think Paul spoke really well there. I think our game tilts to him, doesn't it? It's also the pitch tilts to one side, and he pulls the game to him because he's so positionally disciplined. And we go into him. The way we play sort of gets criticised at the moment because we attack in wide areas and come back to central areas from a higher up the pitch. But when Saka does it, it's all right, isn't it? It's absolutely fine. When he does it, he's giving it to our skipper, and then he's got less people around him because Saka's attracts everyone to him. They can find the pass. When we see that, it works. It doesn't always work with lesser beings, right? So our style of play has been, criticised maybe as being the same, but trust me, when you sit in those red seats and Saka gets the ball, no one feels bored. You know, it's just like, it's all about the art of what's going to happen now. What is the art of the possible when he gets it? Anything can happen. And he what I really like about him is he sees what's on offer, right? So if he needs to spin in behind, and, you know, like he did against Andy Robertson, he spins in behind. You know, if he needs to hold his position, he holds his position. If he needs to get on the back post. Remember the start of the season, he was getting back post headers in pre-season. You know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, he's got things to work on and he wants to work on it, right? And you know, Thierry Henry said the other day about it's time for him to start taking free kicks. You know, this is all to come. He's 23, right? These aspects of his games are not here yet. But the most important thing, I feel, and everybody, is just no re-injury, please. You know, that's the most important thing. You know, just take your time. He's 23 years of age. Hopefully we got at least 10 more good years of him. No re-injury. That's the most important thing. I'll take that over everything at the moment.
Yeah, I think especially if he gets any minutes over the next 2 games, I'm going to be wincing a bit every time he breaks into a sprint down that right-hand side. Just also sticking with you, Clive.
Titanium, Phil. I wouldn't worry about it.
Oh God! Right, Elliot. If you're editing this, delete that ASAP before it gets spoken out into the universe. I just want to stick with you, Clive, because obviously we're talking about the mental effect it could have on us as Arsenal fans and Arsenal as a team, as a group, but also in terms of who we face now, between obviously now and the end of the season. Will their preparations for Arsenal psychologically, tactically change now that Saka is back? And if so, tell me why.
Well, teams were targeting him, weren't they, for a long time now, and he, I think, part of his growth has been dealing with that double, triple team on occasions, and not, you know, putting his ego at the door and saying, okay, I've got 3 around me, let me get it through the gap, because we're going to have a spare man somewhere else, right? So I think everyone knows that we are too Saka-centric, and we've got to learn that lesson. As a club, we've got to learn that lesson. We've got to find ways to lessen his burden, either that be tactically about where he stands in our press, or we do it by making sure we have a equal threat on the other side, right? So we have to do it because the signs have been there for a while, and we've ignored them. But maybe also his ascension has been really quite sharp again. He keeps going up the levels. His goal involvements, he's had the most goal involvements. He's been nowhere near the team for ages. So there's lots of articles with stats coming out about where he's in the league, and he's been sitting down for a while. So yeah, I think we're going to see more of the same. But I do think he affects other teams' mentality. But I do think our mentality needs him probably too much. All right, and I was thinking after watching the girls last night, I was thinking about the next step for Arsenal Football Club, the men's team, and maybe the club as a whole. And we're all focused on the next signings and refreshing squads and things like that. But another thing that we need to really fix is our mentality. I mean, it's a serious mentality to say we're not accepting this anymore. We're not accepting. We need to win, and some of that is in the actions that we take. But I think a lot of that is internal, and internalization about improving our mentality to say that we belong at the very top table. It's been 2 years now that we're Champions League quarterfinal teams. This is still quite new. That's 14 years since we reached a quarterfinal, was last year, and 7 years without competition. This is still quite new, but it's time for us to sit down and say, this is who we are now, and really develop that mentality to say we are not accepting anything less than a Champions League semi-final. And if we get to final, have we got the mentality to win it? We're not here to collect rosettes. Have we got the mentality to really win it? You know, this is what needs to change. We're a young team, improving team, but we haven't improved this year. So we've got to sit down and say, did we have the right mentality at the right times? Are we deadly focused on this? And I think, you know, this is one of the things that I'll be looking at going forward, and having players, which we've seen this year, with personality to say, I'm not accepting this. I'm winning this duel. I'm taking this man on. I'm moving into an area that maybe I shouldn't be, because that's what's required. That mentality is the next step for us, in my opinion.
I mean, I think as well, generally on a wider level, this is a big summer for the club, right? We've got some big additions to make in forward areas. We've got Berta coming in. There's contracts to sort out, players to renew. So we need to get it right. We're looking at Liverpool now, obviously 12 points clear, about to win the league, but they're a bit of a mess behind the scenes. So obviously they'll be happy with the league, but they need to future-proof themselves as well. So I hope that a lot of those conversations are being done now. Things are being organised, because you're absolutely right. We might need to shift that mentality just to go another step, because I think we've just fallen short over the last couple of years. And just before we take a quick break, I wanted to mention Ethan Nwaneri, because this week it's been all about Miles, right? And rightly so. After his impeccable performances for England, everyone is finally seeing how much we love him and why we love him. Well, not everybody, but everyone in the England camp anyway. But Ethan reached a significant milestone as well. He made his England under 21 debut against France, and then scored just 4 days later on his first start against Portugal. Honestly, that could be his last appearance with the under 21s, because I don't think he's very far from the senior squad. But I quite like the idea of him staying with that group a little bit longer. There's already a huge amount of talent in there with Archie Gray, Joe Bellingham, Adam Wharton, Harvey Elliott, Liam Delap. I think Lee Carsley is the right man for him at this point in time. He's been in and around this England setup. He knows when to release the players. There'll be conversations being had with the club. Paul, he did it again. He scored that goal. And if any of you haven't seen the goal, just imagine the most Ethan Nwaneri goal possible, and it was basically that. How many 18-year-olds do you know with a trademark finish?
Well, that's a good point. And in fact, as I was thinking about answering your inevitable question, Phil, as you were building up there, I'm like, that was exactly where I was going to go to. I'm delighted he scored the kind of goal that when he scores that goal, you say, yeah, that's his goal. He can do that all day long. It's the quintessential Ethan Nwaneri goal. You see something, I mean, they're all little collector's items. His ability to just adjust position as he's dribbling, just that touch that takes it to a different spot. He's still perfecting all the different ways he can score variants of that goal. And like the other team know what an Ethan Nwaneri goal looks like. You just can't give him that yard to get going, or he'll do it to you. So they knew it was coming, but he can take it to a few different spots. You see it with Saka as well, where they're like, it almost feels like they're surfing across, they're skipping across multiple waves. He moves inside. He's got the eye line for the goal, but he doesn't quite. So he nudges it on one more. It's almost like table football, where you nudge the ball to you. You're moving the ball back and forward in the same row, and you're kind of flicking it, moving it on one, moving it on, and he will do that. He'll do it 1, 2, 3 times. We've seen it with Saka. So the defense is set, but he moves across one. The defense is set, he moves across one more again. So Robin did it for years. Nobody could stop that. How did he do it? Well, because you don't know which slot he's going to move the ball onto to take the shot. So the whole defense has to keep ratcheting over as quickly as he does. So he'll get tremendous mileage out of that one Nwaneri finish. His fluidity, it's great. And to your point, there's a nice little core there. I hope he stays with that core for a little while, as opposed to sitting on the bench. And like, even if he's not directly in all the crap that goes on with England, talking about their attacking, but the Foden dialogue, that this, used to be Mount, this, that, and the other. And even if he's just collateral damage, leave the poor fellow alone for another year or two till that shakes out. We have maybe too many good attackers that it's not that he should be afraid of them in terms of talent. It's just there's a certain amount of seniority, especially in the England team, and just there's so much crap around, especially with Saka back. There's one more spot gone. He plays all the minutes in every game. So really there's only one other attacking spot available for anybody to fight over, kind of thing. I think he'd be much happier maturing slightly out of the spotlight, letting Miles have his day. I'm sure they've a bit of banter back and forward about that, about who got there first. It's great for Miles Lewis-Skelly to be having his days in the sunshine here. and maybe great for Ethan to kind of have that little frustration, that little glimpse over the shoulder of Miles Lewis-Skelly as to what it's like without, once he's there, once he's kind of broken his duck and he's in the England squad, then you're into this whole other narrative. He can wait another year or so before he needs to worry about all that rubbish.
It is a good group. I mean, it is a really talented group. You already see established Premier League players in there. I did enjoy, there was some quotes from Amari Hutchinson talking about how he'd taken Ethan under his wing. And I was like, he's already better than you, mate. But Clive, obviously I can't talk about this goal and not let you come in. So I'll give you a chance to come and wax lyrical about Ethan.
Yeah, on this one is an interesting one, and how he used where he picked up the ball. So he shifted to the right to create the cutback opportunity, right? So rather than take it around a straight line, then shift, he no, I'm going to go to the right to cut left, and then took it early, so the player knows he's going to cut left, but then he takes it early, so they couldn't get back on him. I think he's a smart dude, and there's obviously lots of film out there of him, and they're talking about him when he was a kid. He said it himself. He said when he's talking about the next game, he's talking about goals, right? So in our minds, we've already got him in the number 10 position, right? Or around attacking midfield or maybe right wing. It doesn't really matter. But in his head, he thinks goals. And maybe that tells you who he is or who he might end up being. Obviously, he's just turned 18, so his physical development is not done. Look at Saka at 18 to what he looks like now, right? Looks like a god now compared to then, right? So let's see what he looks like in a couple of years' time. But the whole 9 thing is in my head, and I described him, and people need to understand why I was going with this. I described him as the new Trossard. Purely positionally, where can Trossard play? He can play inside, he can play outside, and he can play 9. And so I just think that's who he could be, right, for us in the squad, right? And maybe at this early age, that's who he needs to be, right? So
Clive, can I get this straight? You described him as a Trossard, and the people out there didn't love it?
Well, it's more the profile. People are not going to think he's a Trossard. They're going to see more explosion, and what's he on about? But look where Trossard has played for us, right? So, and I see the same for him. Some people think Trossard should be playing false 9 right now. And with Saka back, that could come back because Saka has the ability to take that first ball and post up. So that's when Trossard has done well. When Kai's been at the sort of 10 or Saka's played, he didn't do well without both of them at Leicester, and he was moved real quick because he can't hold that first ball. So what do? We put Mourinho in. What can he do? Hold the first ball, right? So the whole Nwaneri 9 thing may depend on who's the 10. If the 10 is Havertz, you can see it working, can't you? You can see it working down the road. It's all about the balance, what the game requires. And so, obviously people have their ideas about Miles. There's 1 or 2 positions he can play. Doesn't really matter because he's all about one-on-ones and dominating. So where you want to put him is up to you, right? So, but Ethan is really interesting. And I don't think we've got him yet in our heads. And I'll be interested. I think he could end up being down that gut because, mate, he hits the ball hard both feet. And you can't ignore it. And when you see that, and when a coach sees that, someone who can stick it in the net, trust me, you won't be putting him out in the wing too much longer. But it doesn't make sense, right? So.
No. I mean, we had a similar debate about Lewis-Skelly in the last pod. I think I called him a tactical cheat code because of what he offers in various states of build-up and how comfortable he is in different zones on the pitch. And I absolutely do feel a similar way with Ethan. Maybe this is just how players are developed now with that comfort and understanding across the pitch. But this is someone who could play, as you mentioned, Clive, as the striker in a midfield role, on both wings. If you watch the highlights of his, individual performance against Portugal, look at where he's picking up the ball. He's in an 8 role. He's driving through the center of the pitch with real pace and explosion to get away from people. And I think even now you can see he's not fully developed yet, but there's such a speed and intensity over those first few yards. And Paul, I'll put this to you. when we've seen Ethan so far this season, his best football has been on the right. But with Saka coming back and likely to big dog his way back into the team, is there scope for Ethan to be tried in other areas between now and the end of the season to give us just an added extra bit of something in those forward areas?
Yeah, so the position that intrigues me for him, no, we've seen him on the wing. He's great. He's a potentially a Saka analog there. And when he gets a little stronger, a little bigger, a little more experienced, there may not be, you might separate them with the sheet of paper in terms of what they can do from that side, even though it didn't seem like that was originally Arteta's thinking in terms of the options he could play him. I think he mentioned the 9 before he mentioned the wing. Wing was kind of, yeah, he could play there. Now, of course, we had Saka at that point, so it's like, what do you need him for? But we've always thought we needed some kind of backup. I can't see a more analogous backup to Saka in the market, let alone in the team. There's the right 8 role. Obviously, that seemed to have been where he was penciled in, at least kind of in the short to medium term. Odegaard backup, and we can all see that. The left 8 is an interesting position. Now, I don't see him being a starter for us because that's a very light left and right 8. If it's Odegaard and him, that's just a little light for the Premier League week in, week out. But as that option you want from the left 8 to bring some direct running because it's 60 minutes, 70 minutes into the game and this guy comes on, they're not prepared for. They have no read of his patterns, his ability to pick up that ball in midfield and drive. The left-hand side is often the area where we have most space, but do the least with it. We've talked now for a season and a half, 2 seasons about how do we really get the left-hand side to work. And maybe we continue to kind of keep that a very industrial side. But with 20 minutes to go and a goal required, you put Ethan Nwaneri on, and suddenly all this chaos ensues around him as he just needs to beat one guy. I mean, that's everybody, right? Just beat one guy, and you're into a whole area of the pitch, and their heads are spinning around, and they're turning around, opens up the whole attacking area. So I almost think that's my little project. Ethan Nwaneri as the left 8. I don't see it week in, week out, 90 minutes as a pop. But man, imagine you have Saka, Odegaard, and you're like, what else can we do here? Wish we'd bought Elliot's Eberechi Eze during the summer, but we didn't. What else can we do here? Well, you got
Too
this
expensive.
guy. Yeah. What
Too
can
old.
he not do? Yeah. What can he not do that you'd want? He can smack it. He can leather it. But mostly he'll have their heads spinning on, hang on, who's where, who's between the lines, who's floating around. And suddenly everybody else gets more fluid. Odegaard and him start to interchange. Who are we marking? Where are we going? Shit, they're turning us around. They're in behind. He's, Trossard, whoever our left 8 is drifting to the left 8. He's going into the centre forward spot and running in behind. I've talked myself into it. Left 8.
Can I come back to that, Phil? I think
Sure, go.
I think it's going to be interesting what Paul said there. Last 20 minutes to get him to left 8, and what I'm thinking as he's talking, I'm thinking, you know what is it about him? And he brings threat to a game, a real
Always.
threat. So in our minds, we've already got the answer. Paul's already said we need to get him on. He's not doing that. He's doing that because we're 1 goal behind or 1-1 or something like that. That's the game status in his mind straight away because he's thinking threat. He's thinking goals. He's thinking shots. So the phrase, don't turn away from your gift. If his gift is goal scoring, right, then we got to think about making sure he doesn't lose that threat. We can be a bit passy, can't we? Shape movers, rotational. This guy says, nah, get it, bang, I'm going straight for your heart. I'm going to shift it and shoot. That threat is just something we got to make sure we don't coach out and stays in him. Because we're going to need that. We need that threat, don't we? Because Saka's got it. The rest of the team is more formulaic, So we've got to make sure that we keep this kid threatening. That's where I am with it, really. And Paul's position doesn't really matter. Where he picks it up, he's already showing two-footedness. he can shift, mate. He's got the pitter-patter steps and he real shift. And so, yeah, these are all first world problems, aren't they?
Yeah. What we've seen with him is he's been great, and then we're like, oh, start him in the next game. And of course, in the next game, they're ready for him. The Premier League, the defense set in. He's gotten it, and we're like, that was a bit vanilla. But you come on at 70 minutes on the left-hand side. A, you've got more space because it's 70 minutes. B, they are not set for Ethan Nwaneri. And C, the left-hand side is where we have generally had more space because maybe it's just the Saka Odegaard effect of pulling people outside. But you kind of think naturally of the left-hand side, Rice striding up the left-hand side of the pitch, or Martinelli. And of course, you put Nwaneri into that space, and now you're going to loosen that up for whoever's on the left-hand side, be it Trossard or Martinelli, because they can't have two people on Martinelli with bloody Nwaneri on the ball, beating his first man and then into a pocket of space. Suddenly, guess what? Whoever the left winger is has all sorts of options. So once again, I'm working myself into a lather here at the idea, and he's never going to play for us at left 8, but I'm there.
Look, I think it's very clear that we've got options in this team now, with Martinelli back, with Saka coming back, and suddenly things are looking good again. So, Clive, you're absolutely right to mention we're about to approach 46 minutes here, so that feels like a good time to break off. We'll give Elliot a chance to flex his telemarketing muscles and be back with more in part 2. So see you then. Welcome back to part 2 of the show, and let's start this segment with some Martin Odegaard chat, because it's fair to say that he's had a mixed season. There was the big ankle injury suffered on international duty. He then came back, made an instant impact. But like the team, he's huffed and puffed along the way, doing his best, but without much X factor. When it comes to why, I think we've done this conversation to death, and I don't know how much more juice we can squeeze from that particular fruit. So let's move the conversation forward a little bit. I think some corners of the fan base have gone to extremes, but I also don't think he should be exempt from criticism as one of our key players, as our captain as well, because his performances have been a bit up and down. Paul, he's got his mates back. Saka is coming back. White's back. We've got the option of putting that right-hand pod together, maybe when Timber needs a rest, as you mentioned before. The team is looking more vibrant from an attacking perspective with Martinelli and Saka back. What would you like to see from Odegaard moving forward?
I'd like to see him playing a lot better.
Right. Next question. Yeah.
Look, it's a weird one, right? Because he's definitely a guy with a positioned as not really being a form player. Like Saka, for me, there isn't a lot of volatility in their levels. They're just super consistent. But I can't deny it, he's been a bit off. Now, I do think we got a thanking nerve. There's a lot of criticism. We have criticism to spare for players, especially when things aren't going well. And we're all human. I get it. But like, I have this picture in my mind of you run into the guy in the supermarket and like, oh, it's Martin Odegaard buying fruit. And it's like, the guilt kicks in. Have I said stuff about him it's really not fair because of where we've been? I met him in the supermarket feeling. I can't criticize the guy. Yes, he's a little off. I'm very defensive of certain players. And Odegaard, his levels, his consistency, it's not quite where it was. And there are some reasons for it, but also you just got to say he's not quite where he was before. I don't think, he could be carrying. So I just think sometimes there's a level you haven't found again. The automatisms. He hasn't had the same people to automatism with, but still not quite a good enough excuse for why he isn't quite at the level. What I'd say against that is our standards for him are so high. He's been very good. He just hasn't been brilliant. And we've got used to, he was probably the best player in the league last year or thereabouts, right? And he's not this year. He's just not. He's just a very, very good player. And that's kind of my defensiveness about him. Yes, I agree. He's not at a 10 at the moment. He's probably at a 7, occasionally drifting. And the other weird thing is he came back from injury he came straight back at that level for me anyway. For 2-3 we debate. Oh, he had one good game. He had 3 good games. What he didn't have was a 4th good game. I would say he had 3 really good games. And then it kind of trailed off a little bit. But look, he's getting Saka back. That's Pulp Fiction when they get the needle and stab the girl in the chest. And Uma Thurman, I guess. She's not playing for us. She's moved on. But stab him in the chest, adrenaline shot, off to the races. He's got Saka. He's got White or Timber. Probably doesn't. Timber's getting so jiggy with the plan. I don't think it really matters who it is. And we will see. We'll see what levels they can get each other up to. But those patterns, those automatisms, they then know the level themselves. The classic thing I always use when we get to the instant reaction and we got to do stocks falling, I like to lean on, he'll know himself, so that I don't feel too bad critiquing. They'll know themselves when they're not at the races, and that will help them get to the levels. And one last thing, we need him for the press. We need Saka for the press. We don't have Havertz. So we got Marino. He just can't do it like those guys can. I think Trossard is the closest. If we really want to do that kind of press that our team kind of depends on to have Saliba and Gabriel on the halfway line, that's kind of the death knell for me for Marino as the striker, despite all the good work he might do and the fact that you might want a 6'2" guy who can head the ball in the box. If we're going to lean on pressing, then you get Saka, Odegaard, Trossard, and Martinelli on the left wing. Now you can press again, and without that, you can't. That's my feeling on it.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously came off a big performance for Norway midweek with 3 assists for his country. There were a couple of brilliant ones as well. One from a corner as well, which is good considering half of his ones haven't beaten the first man recently. Clive, I'll let you come in quickly before we move on. What's one thing you would like to see from Odegaard between now and the end of the season, apart from maybe a double cheeseburger and putting his foot through the ball?
Yeah, that's, mate. You had me at cheeseburger, right? So he definitely, that's what's changed, isn't it? He's lost a bit of power, isn't he? He's lost a bit of power and he's lost a bit of weight, and so he had a physical change. So he doesn't look quite as springy. He wasn't super pacey anyway, and just that half a yard off is getting him involved in too many collisions, and he's not a collision player. He's somebody that evades collisions by his ability to move and manipulate the ball and keep shifting the point of where he wants to go, right? So when you see him getting kicked, you know he's not moving right. When you see him getting substituted, you know he's not quite fit. And that's it. And we've seen him run games for us, multiple games, to start to finish. Everything we do, he's run the games. So you just have to remember, once you've seen that and you've seen his high level, he can come back again. He's not 106, right? He's still a young man, right? He'll come back again. It's a clear reason why he's not at his tip top for me. But while it's happened, what he's done is open up the conversation around him. He's opened up the conversation around his influence overall in the team. And are we, again, much like Saka, when you miss people, it's like, are we too reliant on them in every single phase? Are we asking them to do too much? People want to shift into the left-hand side. They can make room for other people. So we're doing what we always do, select first 11s. I don't like it because first 11s will change on the game state and what the opposition are doing. And as long as we've got the option to change to that so we can take advantage of what's on offer, then I'm fine with it, right? So I would like to see him leave the pitch on occasion sooner so he's fresher for other days. I would like to see him sit on occasion so he's fresher for other days. If we can get to that point, which we haven't been for the last couple of years, because he's so integral to what we do. So part of our change in mentality may be that our skipper does not play 95 minutes every single game. And that's what we have to get to. So for me, he's on his way back. So I saw the assist film, and that's why you got it on the agenda. He's on his way back. This little break, hopefully, he's got a lot to prove in Madrid, hasn't he? So if it's one big game, Madrid looks like going to have half their team banned, according to my Twitter feed. So one big game, this could be our moment, right? So let's see.
I wouldn't put too much faith in UEFA, to be fair. They'll play both of our games and then miss the semi-finals. So that's just how things seem to be going. Paul, you want to come back in on that quickly?
Yeah, as Clive was talking there, it reminded me of one other thing. Like, we need to be able to. It doesn't have to be on the pitch for 90 minutes, but I think one of the things that may have a little bit of armchair psychologist bit here, sports psychologist even. One of the things that may have detracted a bit is he's trying to do too much. He's all over the. Now, if not him, then who? So it was probably for the good of the team, but maybe it's one of those things that maybe doesn't make him look so good. Like in the old view of a striker, they kind of drift out of a game. They'd be waiting for their moment to pop into. It was really about them doing what they needed to perform their role in a team. Now, strikers are of a much broader role these days. He's the other end of the spectrum where he used to just run a quarter or half the pitch. Now he's trying to run 3/4 of it. He's dropping into the back line. And it's not a fault, it's not a critique, but it means when it comes to his part of the pitch where we expect him to be brilliant, he's not brilliant, he's good. He isn't at his levels to begin with, and being all over the pitch, trying to do it all, trying to push forward a team that has struggled to create in open play. It's a natural tendency, and we're probably better for it, but he's not going to get much thanks because he's looking a bit more just like a player all over the pitch, making a pass, running back, and by the time he gets back into that spot, he's not in the mental magic of knowing the right-hand corner of the pitch and some brilliance, and before you know it, we're through on goal. So I think he's stolen from one pot to give to the other. That's my defending Martin Odegaard, so I can look him in the eye when I get to the supermarket framing of it anyway. Saka's back. Look, he won't need to do quite as much of all of that. He won't feel and it won't actually be all on him to come up with some magic. I think that'll help him.
Yeah, that was going to be my point. If the lights were maybe a little bit too bright for him when he's had to take on more responsibility, now he'll have to delegate some of that responsibility, and hopefully we can just see the best of him in the areas that we need him to be good. I'm not saying he's not good at doing the other stuff, but where he's best, is that right-hand corner of the box. So, yeah. As Clive said, the Bernabeu wouldn't be a bad place to prove some people wrong. So just before we finish, I wanted to address some Martin Zubimendi talk, because most of the reporting in England anyway was that Arsenal were confident about signing him this summer, having failed to lure him away from San Sebastian in the past, although that applies to Barcelona and Liverpool as well. But there have been links to Real Madrid in recent days, and from some reliable sources too, who are now saying that he's a priority target for them and they've accelerated talks. I have to be honest, stylistically, he doesn't feel like a Real Madrid player to me, at least in my mind, because they thrive on chaos. And the players who excel in that squad are firefighters. They're putting out fires. And Zubimendi is a guy who makes sure those fires don't happen in the first place. So, maybe with Modric aging a little bit and Tchouaméni not really convincing, could that be an option for Arsenal this summer? Who knows? Him pinging passes about in midfield does make sense, but he doesn't jump out to me as a natural fit for Real Madrid. And again, this could be just paper talk. Clive, you've been quick to defend Zubimendi when others have had doubts. Where do you stand on these rumours? Do you think it's just some paper talk, or could Real Madrid be just another giant coming in for him?
Well, I listened to David Ornstein, mate, and David Ornstein says he hasn't heard of any of these rumours, and he's only heard that we're advanced. And so, to be honest, I had a little bit of scouting on him to have a look at him, because he doesn't really fit my eye of a central midfielder, defensive style midfielder. I have to really look. I have to look hard, And I remember the Euros final when Rodri went off. I'm thinking, come on, this is it, mate. And this other guy came on, and I think he was actually better, right? So, and he was fantastic for the second half. And people say, don't look at international football. Well, I do look at international football when it's England, because I know them blokes in the England team, and they couldn't find him with a torch. Do you know what I mean? He was all over the place, and his passing was really, really good. So that really stood out to me. So I was just looking at him and saying, why do Arsenal want him? Why does every single scout seriously talks about him, analysts talk about him, and they're so positive? So when I looked, and I sort of clicked with me real big time. His ability to pass quickly off either foot instantly and have an instant picture to go forward when it's on is really good. And also the message on those passes. So if it needs to be a little dink, needs to be a clip, needs to be a volley to go over the top, whatever it is to take the opportunity of the open spaces, which we are not good at. We do not take open spaces very, very quickly. We are very much a multi-phase attacking team by design. We take the first few passes. Once we take transition, we get to 3 passes. We do that slowly. We get into what I call defensive shape to attack. Then we go with the sole intention of having multiple phases of attack, waiting for the tired defender to knock off, then knock him out, and then we go in from there. Other teams are a bit more direct. Could we add a bit of direct thinking when it's on offer? Why do we have to do it in 15 passes? We can do it in 3 if it's on offer. That's a multiple thing. That is having someone who can see it from deeper positions and having runners in attack who can hit that last line with a little bit of threat. People off the left, a centre forward who can run, who I'm thinking about. And so these are the things we need to add, right? So this is what I think is the next phase. So I really did wrap a lot around Zubimendi. It could be somebody else, because honestly, mate, I'm one tweet away from being somebody else. But as long as that person can see the early pass and can dictate the tempo of our team from deep, and I think we need that player if we're losing 2. So, yeah, I find this a very interesting selection, a very interesting step in our attacking evolution. And it doesn't fit what I like. I tend to like a 6'1" person that can shoulder people around, that can stride around. I'm not looking at the rhythm of playmaking, but I'm changing because the game's becoming so structured and what's on offer is so finite. And it's not there for long because teams are so well coached to get into positions and they get into defensive shape so quickly. You have to be more instant to take advantage of the opportunity that's there. So that's why I've warmed to him. I'm trying to explain to people that I'm with you. I have the same fears of athleticism, etc. But I'm thinking, no, the game is different now. The distance is from Saliba to our centre forward. It's only like 30 yards. It's a different game. It's a compact game. You're playing in crowd scenes. You've got to be able to see clarity. And I think he does. So that's why I've defended him. Or somebody like him. That makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. And Paul, we haven't really heard you talk about Zubimendi so much. Tell me where you are on him. Have you watched the scouting videos? Have you been on YouTube to do your bits and pieces there? And is that the type of midfield signing you feel we need this summer?
So the idea of Zubimendi is the kind of signing I think we should have. The fact that big clubs want him is a very positive sign. I just can't quite see it. You go to a wine tasting and you're with somebody who's not a spoofer. They have a really good palate, and they're like, "Oh, it's got essence of blueberry and horses' hooves in a barnyard and leather," and you're like, "I like it. I think it's good. I will pay 3 times the amount because my mate, who I know has a really good palate, really like." Zubimendi's a bit like that for me. I can't see the superpower, and that's probably a really great thing because it's all the subtlety, the la pausa, the choosing your moments, the simple quick pass to that guy rather than the, and it just doesn't. He's the classic. We played some team. Turns out in the Europa League or something, and then 6 months later, everybody's talking about some player, and you're like, we played against them, and I don't even remember the player, let alone he's not that player you think, Modric, you're like, he kills you, right? And he's a tiny little fella running all over the pitch, and he's killing you with this pass and that pass, and he punches you. So 6 months later, oh yeah, Modric, I remember we played against a team with Modric in it. Zubimendi he's very subtle, and here's my other analogy so I think he's going to be really good, mainly because I can't quite see it, but that's kind of what you would expect. It's the absence of something in a way. He's all those subtle choices. It reminds me a bit of a music album. I don't know if they have albums these days anymore, but back in the day one of the measures of a great album was you didn't like it the first time you heard it. It's not like catchy like a pop. You have to listen to it 2, 3, 4 times. Like the more you had to listen to it before you liked it, probably the more you were going to love it as the subtleties get to you. Like the best album I ever had, my brother had this Van Morrison album. I think I've listened to it 100 times. I still didn't like it. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I think Zubimendi might be that guy where you're just never going to see very much, but the effect around the team. Now, this is pure projection because I can't see it. I still can't. He's a fascinating experiment. The only problem, it's an experiment on ourselves. You know what I mean? I'd love to see that experiment run out on somebody else. Like, I can see it, but like, this is the move for us. This is the worldy midfielder. And have I seen the worldy midfielder? Kind of, sort of, I guess.
How did you feel when Jorginho came, Paul?
You see, he's very much Jorginho for me.
That's it.
And I think actually Jorginho pops a little bit more for me. He does.
Because you know him better. So you know the relationship with Havertz and you know what he can do. And I think if Jorginho's 25, we're not buying Zubimendi. It's simple as that. You know,
I absolutely think he's the Jorginho play, which won't excite a huge number of people. But I actually could see it even before he got to Arsenal more clearly with Jorginho than this guy's even more subtle. Like I can picture certain Jorginho passes. I can't really picture a Zubimendi pass.
It just comes with
time. So he's even more subtle. Yeah.
Sorry, Paul. It just comes with. I don't know why I find myself defending him because I was in the same place, so I thought I better study him because I don't understand it, you know. And so, I see it now. So I was in the same place. Even the other day against Manchester United, I thought, I'm not so sure. I can't have this. I can't have Elliot knocking my head in because we bought a dud. And I thought, but then I did see the Spain game, Phil, against Netherlands. And he was really good in that game.
He was really good, yeah.
And I thought, okay, you're still there. It's still there, and I suppose he's going to be amongst better players. Also, the distances front to back are not going to expose athleticism, but we need to have direct line people around him that can move and understand his wavelength. I think he's the perfect fit for us. But let's see what happens. If he goes to Real Madrid, we just delete this podcast, right? And we won't talk about it ever again.
Delete all the scouting videos, the hours of talking we've done about him. I mean, I agree. I don't think he's perfect, but I think he offers us a lot tactically, which I think we could use. And it could also open up Declan Rice to do a little bit more. It could also open up Odegaard to do a little bit more. You know, I think of where we like to play Miles Lewis-Skelly and Calafiori. He could also cover that space heading over to the left. He just gives a lot, even though he's not like a Rodri or someone like that where his quality is instantly visible. So I still think we're going to go back and forth on him. There's a lot to debate about this player, but I quite like that, to be honest, because, you know, where's the fun if everybody agrees all the time? So I think what Paul is trying to say...
Yeah, no, big picture. What we care about is a player who works well for our stocks rising and falling section of the instant reaction. I think he's going to be absolutely perfect.
Yeah, so basically we have to watch him 100 times and we still won't like him, is what you said, Paul.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
So encouraging.
Hence he will be brilliant, and he's just a bit too subtle for the common man, of which I am one. So
he'll have an average game, and Elliot will give Eze a stock rising. We should have bought him, put Rice in the 6. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, you said, I don't know what a Zubimendi trademark pass is, and I just heard Elliot in the back of my mind saying the ones that go out of play. But yeah, it's lots to talk about with this player. Obviously, the links might be rubbish, but I thought it was an interesting conversation point anyway. But I think otherwise that's it. I know we've still got a few days to go till Fulham. I don't know if there's any other Patreon content lined up, but I'm sure there'll be some other bits out before then. There'll be a Monday pod anyway. Obviously, the game's on Tuesday, April 1st, so there'll be a Monday pod to discuss things in a bit more detail, I'd imagine. So yeah, otherwise that's kind of it. And I'll say thank you to my guests. Clive, thanks for joining, mate.
Thank you very much, and good job, Phil, hosting. I know it's not easy, so well done, mate.
Pleasure. I've enjoyed stepping in. All this power in my hands at the moment. I'm in the
Don't
chair.
get too cocky, son.
Well, let's see. Paul, always a pleasure to catch up.
Woohoo!
And my name is Phil Costa. It's been really fun hosting the podcast, as I said, during another thrilling international break. If you want to keep me in this position and support my plan to take over the Arsenal Vision empire, you can follow me on socials, block Elliot as well. And then we will talk to you before Arsenal 10, Fulham 0.